fun and adventure for everyone, from young couples to singles. However, where people gather, trouble can follow. Amidst the revelry, some of the most disturbing deaths have occurred on these vessels. Here are 5 shocking cruise ship deaths that will leave you speechless. On September 23, 2002, 42-year-old Diane Brimble boarded the Pacific Sky cruise ship for a dreamy 10-day, 9-night adventure to Noumea, New Caledonia, and Vanuatu. Accompanied by her sister, daughter, and niece, it was clear this trip was meant to be a memorable family vacation. Within 24 hours of boarding, Brimble headed to the ship's disco to dance and enjoy herself. However, unknown to the mother of 3, her visible enjoyment and heavy drinking made her the target of a man named Richard Wilhelm, one of 8 men who came on the ship as a group. Witnesses later testified that these men spent much of their time on the cruise, allegedly propositioning numerous other female passengers of varying ages. During the disco, a tipsy but happy Brimble wrapped her arms around a cruise ship security guard and tried to dance with him. The guard thought nothing of it, smiling and nodding until Brimble went on her merry way. However, within the next 2 hours after the incident with the security guard, Brimble was seen leaving the ship's disco with Wilhelm, marking the last time any of her family members would ever see her alive. On September 26th, just 3 days after she had boarded the ship, detectives came on board while it was in port in Noumea and began questioning various witnesses after being informed that Brimble had died mysteriously the previous day. The only information they had at the time was that her body was found lying lifeless on the floor of Wilhelm's cabin, where he was lodging with 3 other men from his group of 8, and that all attempts to revive her had proved futile. Brimble's body was then removed from the ship and transported back to Brisbane, Australia, where she resided. She was buried several days later at a funeral attended by her family members and over 25 people. The investigation by the police initially reported Brimble's cause of death as a heart attack. Still, later toxicology reports revealed the presence of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, also known as GHB or fantasy, and alcohol in her system. It raised the question of how Brimble came into contact with the drug, which is widely known as a date rape drug. With all these circumstances surrounding her demise, an inquest was launched in March 2006 to investigate Brimble's death. It was revealed that Wilhelm had given Brimble a drug, which she took willingly and with full consent. It was also confirmed that Wilhelm and Brimble had consensual sex, with several photographs from a retrieved memory stick owned by one of Wilhelm's groupmates supporting this claim. Ultimately, the ruling concluded that Brimble was unknowingly drugged by unscrupulous individuals who were intent on denigrating her for their gratification. Wilhelm's associate, one Letterio Silvestri, was also implicated as the individual who supplied the drug to him. This resulted in charges being filed against Wilhelm, Silvestri, and yet another associate, Ryan Kuchel, in connection with Brimble's death. Wilhelm faced charges of manslaughter and supplying a prohibited drug, while Silvestri and Kuchel were accused of the lesser charge of perverting the course of justice. Initially, Wilhelm pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and was taken to trial in October 2009, about 7 years after the incident occurred. However, the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict on one of the charges, resulting in the case being declared a mistrial. The prosecutors refiled for a trial on both counts, and a new trial began in April 2010. This time around, something unusual occurred. Wilhelm pleaded guilty to the charge of manslaughter, but the presiding judge rejected the plea. The judge believed there was insufficient evidence to support the charge of manslaughter, stating that Wilhelm was unaware he was putting Brimble's life in danger, and that most importantly, Brimble had voluntarily taken the drug. Wilhelm later pleaded guilty to the far lesser charge of supplying a prohibited drug, and a conviction was finally recorded. However, the judge once again deemed it unfair to impose any punishment on him, considering the years of public humiliation and severe mental illness he had endured since Brimble's death. The ruling faced significant criticism from many members of Brimble's family, who believed that Wilhelm should have faced more severe punishment. For them, the settlement offered by P&O Cruises, the operator of the Pacific Sky cruise ship, was not enough to soothe the pain of losing Brimble. Although their criticism did not lead to an appeal, Brimble's death prompted the adoption of stricter security measures, like security sniffer dogs on Australian cruises, to enhance safety in the long run. On July 2017, Christy and Kenneth Manzanares embarked on a week-long voyage aboard the cruise ship Emerald Princess with Princess Cruises, traveling from Seattle to Alaska. The trip held special significance beyond just a holiday for the couple, who were joined by their 3 daughters and some family members. It coincided with their 18th wedding anniversary celebration, marking a significant milestone since they first fell in love as high school sweethearts. However, the celebration soon turned into a tragedy. On one of the early nights of the trip, Kenneth's behavior became increasingly troubling, causing Christy significant discomfort. Upon returning to their cabin for the night, the couple engaged in a heated argument over Kenneth's actions. Suddenly, Christy reportedly expressed her exhaustion with the marriage and her intention to file for divorce once they returned to land. She also urged her husband to leave the ship and return home rather than making the cruise unbearable for her with his presence. Seemingly shocked by Christy's remarks, Kenneth ordered his daughters to leave the cabin during the argument. Within minutes of their departure, the girls heard screams indicating their mother was in distress. Despite their concerns, their father prevented them from entering the room. They both went to the connected balcony, witnessing a horrific scene unfolding in their cabin. Kenneth was straddling Christy on the bed, repeatedly striking her in the head with closed fists. During the struggle, Kenneth even attempted to throw Christy overboard. However, this was thwarted by a witness, who grabbed her by the ankles and pulled her back into the cabin. Amid the uproar, security personnel on board were contacted to intervene in the matter. However, by the time they arrived, the worst had already happened. Christy was found with a severe head wound, lying on the floor and covered in blood. Meanwhile, Kenneth had blood on his hands and clothing, with blood also spattered throughout the cabin. Immediately, Kenneth was placed in handcuffs by one of the security personnel and then held in an adjoining cabin. He remained there until FBI agents arrived at the cruise, as such cases fell under their jurisdiction due to occurring on water. It was later determined that Christy was killed by blunt force trauma to her head and face, although this was already apparent from the nature of the crime scene and witness statements. Following the incident, charges were brought against Kenneth for killing his wife, and in an attempt to absolve Kenneth of his actions, his defense attorneys argued that he had an undiagnosed brain injury and mood disorder. They also claimed that the prescription medication he took for his condition, combined with the alcohol he consumed that night, triggered the violent reaction he displayed. However, prosecutors argued that the attack was deliberate. They pointed out that Kenneth told others to leave the cabin and lock the door before the assault, which ended up leading to Christy's untimely demise. Their claim was further supported by reports that Kenneth spontaneously stated his life was over when the FBI was processing him, indicating awareness of his actions. Ultimately, Kenneth entered into a plea agreement for killing his wife, which required him to agree to a charge of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison with no chance of parole, and he was also expected to serve 5 years of probation after completing his sentence. However, before the plea agreement, he was held at the Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Alaska while awaiting a decision about his charges. After sentencing, he was set to be transferred to federal prison, but was found unresponsive in his cell a few weeks after the decision was made. It was stated that foul play wasn't suspected in Kenneth's death, but details of his autopsy and medical condition remained confidential due to prison regulations. Quentin Hunter was only 6 when he followed his father, Cassell Hunter, Tashara Hunter, and his 10-year-old brother Jermaine Hunter on a 4-day cruise aboard the Carnival Victory liner in October 2013. The young boys had so much fun on the cruise, including several swims in the ship's pool. As the ship approached its last leg of the trip, they wanted one last dip in the pool and pleaded with their father to allow them. Cassiel agreed to their demand, a choice he would soon regret. Initially, he watched the boys dive in and begin their fun, as no other swimmers were around and no lifeguards near the pool. The only people nearby were a few others getting ready for the final party on the deck, including a DJ setting up his equipment. While watching his sons, Cassell got distracted by a conversation with one of his wife's church friends, who was also on the ship. The few minutes he took his eyes off his young boys were enough for disaster to strike. Suddenly he heard the DJ shout for someone to pull a drowning kid out of the water. For Cassell, everything seemed to happen in both fast and slow motion. He saw a stranger jump into the pool and pull Quentin out. At that moment, Jermaine, the older brother, was not in the pool. He had stepped out earlier to dance to the DJ's first few songs, leaving Quentin alone in the water. As soon as Quentin was pulled out, people immediately began trying to resuscitate him. The scene was chaotic. Meanwhile, Tashara, their mother, had just arrived to gather her family for dinner. She was horrified to find Quentin lying lifeless by the pool, a scene she later described as her worst nightmare. Despite their best efforts to resuscitate Quentin, his lungs were already too clogged up by the water he had swallowed. He was eventually pronounced dead by the ship's doctor. Following an investigation, his death was ruled accidental, with no foul play suspected. After burying their son, Quentin's parents sought legal recourse, hoping to hold the cruise line accountable for not providing lifeguards. However, months after the incident, they learned that they could not sue the cruise owners or obtain a settlement for the emotional pain caused by their loss. One of the obstacles they faced was the wrongful death statute in maritime law, also known as the Death on the High Seas Act. It only allows for compensation related to financial losses. This includes loss of financial support, services, and funeral expenses. but it does not cover damages such as pain and suffering, emotional distress, or loss of companionship. The hunters also discovered no industry policy mandating lifeguards on cruise ship pools. The only requirement is to provide conspicuous signage alerting passengers that no lifeguard is on duty, similar to the practice at many land-based hotels and resorts with swimming pools. Ultimately, all the Hunter family received from the cruise owners was an apology. This fell short of addressing their concerns and those of many others regarding the safety of pools for children accompanying their parents on cruises. 72-year-old Nigel Blythe Tinker was returning to England after an extended period in Australia. Over the years, he had established himself as a distinguished legal expert within the gaming industry. He played a pivotal role at William Hill and later ascended to a prominent position at GVC Holdings, the multi-billion-pound parent company of Ladbrokes, where he served as chairman. His tenure in these roles marked a significant chapter in his career, reflecting his influence and leadership in the gaming sector. Before his move to England, Nigel opted for a one-day cruise aboard the renowned Seven Seas Mariner on July 23. It is unclear why he did so, but it has been speculated that he wanted to enjoy one final adventure before returning home. The cruise proceeded without incident until Nigel was found missing when the ship reached its final destination. His family tried to contact him but received no response. They then alerted the ship authorities about his disappearance. Upon searching Nigel's room, the ship staff found it empty, with his clothes neatly folded on the bed. A thorough search of the entire ship yielded no sign of Nigel, whether alive or dead. Subsequently, Nigel was officially declared missing, and an investigation was launched. Despite efforts, the investigation failed to locate Nigel. However, CCTV footage from the cruise ship later provided clues about what may have happened. This prompted Nigel's daughter, Sophie Elizabeth Blythe Tinker, to initiate a claim of presumption of death to get closure concerning her father's disappearance. During the hearing for the claim, Sophie revealed information that was not known at the time of her father's disappearance. She shared that they had been in contact with him for most of the trip, but that he had been displaying unusual behavior and sending confusing messages in which he wasn't himself. One of these messages was sent to a cousin expressing deep despair. Concerned for his well-being, they sent a ship doctor to check on him. However, Nigel denied having such thoughts and assured the doctor that he was physically well, aside from back pain. The ship's CCTV footage suggested that Nigel was distraught on the night he disappeared. The video revealed a person believed to be Nigel falling from the ship near his cabin balcony. Ultimately, it is still inconclusive as to the cause of Nigel's death and if it was accidental. Additionally, since the ship was miles away from any port or land at the time, it was unlikely that Nigel could have swum to safety or been rescued by passing boats. The exact reason for Nigel's fall is still a mystery, even though there are speculations that he may have purposefully jumped due to the concerning messages he had sent to his family. 1 week before his 46th birthday, Shane Dixon, a father of 3, boarded PEO's Pacific Adventure in Australia for his first ever cruise. Accompanying him on the trip was his mother, Sue Dixon, who had paid for the trip as a treat for both. Dixon was so excited about the journey that he shared photos on his social media with the caption mentioning how happy he was to partake. One of the images showed him smiling at the harbor just as he was about to board the cruise ship with his mother. Aboard the ship, Dixon was drawn to the allure of the casino and soon enough started playing. However, instead of sticking to his financial limits, he continued gambling even after significant losses, eventually racking up a massive debt of $5,000. Later that night, he borrowed $5,000 from his mother to pay off the debt. One would think Dixon had learned his lesson, but he returned to the casino the next night. Soon, he had accrued an additional $40,000 in debt on top of what he owed his mother. Faced with the dilemma of paying off his debts before leaving the ship and having already exhausted the option of borrowing from his mother, Dixon made a shocking decision. 2 hours before the 3-day cruise was due to dock back in Sydney, the father of 3 jumped overboard to his death. His body was recovered a few hours later after rough seas hampered the search operation with 5-meter waves. Dixon's actions shocked everyone aboard the ship once the news spread. Some had seen him hours before he took the plunge, and he seemed energetic and happy. To all, Dixon never appeared to have planned something so drastic. His decision remained an enigma until subsequent interviews with his family members hinted at possible reasons for his despair. The interviews revealed that Dixon had grappled with many personal tragedies and setbacks in recent years. These included health issues, family deaths, and the breakdown of his marriage, which led to estrangement from his children. On Dixon's social media, he often talked about his struggles and how they were overwhelming. So when he accrued more debts, it tipped him over the edge, as he felt there was no coming back from his mistakes. Beyond highlighting Dixon's issues, the family also blamed the casino for using various incentives to ensure gamblers find it difficult to leave, even after exceeding their budget. Their claims were backed by several people who played at the casino simultaneously as Dixon. These individuals revealed that the casino had given them several free drinks, prizes, and vouchers to keep them hooked. They added that they were pushed to run up eye-watering bills by charging losses to their rooms rather than paying up front, making them unaware of how much they had accrued. Even when they asked for self-exclusion to prevent them from returning to gamble at the casino, the staff on board told them it was not an option. In response to the accusations, a spokesperson for the cruise ship denied that the casino's gambling practices played a part in Dixon's death. The spokesperson claimed they have responsible gaming conduct policies on all their ships and take those policies seriously. In the end, Dixon's family was left to come to terms with their loss alone, with his mother in particular entirely devastated by his death.